you're hitting it right on here with us as guys, that we do need each other. In fact, that's what I'm going to talk about here in just a few minutes. So that is just so right on. In the aspect of being a Navy SEAL, when you were growing up, did you ever think that you would become a Navy SEAL?
No, I didn't. Matter of fact, when I joined the Navy, I didn't tell anybody. And I came home, and I was sitting at the table, and it kind of goes something like this. I was like, hey, Mom, can you pass me mashed potatoes? I just joined the Navy. And she's like, you did what? You did what? And I go, yeah, just joined the Navy. I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. And she goes, oh, wait a minute. And she's kind of laughing at me. And then she gets real serious. She goes, you have any idea what you just did? And I go, yeah, I do, and I'm going to do it.
I fished in Alaska for years with 2 retired Navy commanders. They were pilots and flew combat missions and everything. And the big advertising thing of the Navy is join the Navy and see the world.
Yeah.
And instead, what they would say is join the Navy, smell the bilges. That's what they were saying. For those of you who don't know what the bilges is, at the bottom of the boat and where all the gunk and mess goes. So, but as a Navy SEAL, you mentioned it briefly there, but what a position it is to be a Navy SEAL, because you are an elite team sent to some place in the world for something that is so important that it's got to be accomplished. And then not only that, but you mentioned the word geopolitical situations. You have to uphold who the U.S. is. You have to be aware. You guys are not just warriors. You have to know how your work or your actions are going to impact even world events.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that for a minute? Just the behind-the-scene reality of the pressure of those guys. Very few can make it to be a Navy SEAL. What's the dropout rate?
90%.
90%.
Yeah.
On purpose.
Well, yeah, and they find guys from all over the United States. So just the selection process to get to the point to go to SEAL training is thousands. They go through thousands of guys. And so my class had 143 people in it, and 17 of us graduated.
Yeah.
And they make it difficult for a reason. So, when we're out there, we find ourselves in some interesting situations. We see things differently, and I've read the newspapers when we get back on some of the stuff we did, which I don't even know if they were in the same country as us. It's completely different than actually what happened. But we have to be really we have to be careful in what we do and what we say and how we interact with people, because even the slightest mistake has consequences.
Yeah, and you were a medic, and so you were responsible going in, having to not only watch for yourself, but then go to guys who are injured and all of that. And obviously, life and death are a reality on those teams. So talk to us just for a few minutes here about Tim, the man, in those settings. And, I'm going to talk in a moment about how it's not good for man to be alone. Talk about those moments of just you. You talked a moment ago about being in the helicopter, very first time. And there's a lot of stuff goofing around. And then the chief says, it's time to go. Everybody gets serious. Everybody gets locked in. And you realize in that moment that this is it, okay? What did you find in those times of a 25-year career going in and out of combat? How did Christ help you, and how did you draw on your relationship with Christ in those extreme times and places?
Yeah, so I have had a very strong faith my entire life. I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic schools and studied and went to church. And, before I even entered the military, I had a very, very strong faith. I wore a small gold cross, which I told Pastor Steve about this, that it was mangled and bent underneath my body armor, but I swear I had more than 9 lives. It saved me more than once. And every time I'd go out, I'd take a knee and I'd say a prayer, not only for myself, but for my guys, my family back home. And the stress, the U.S. government is very good at putting a lot of responsibility on very young guys. And the stress of being the corpsman, the medic in charge of everybody's medical being, was a lot for a really young guy. And I remember thinking, geez, we're going to go on this mission. If anything happens, it's on me. And so, prayer and faith and something higher than myself was essential. It was so important to get me through those really, really difficult times.
And, it's one thing to be on a war, on a battlefield, and it's something else with, how, you face the moment, how you deal with yourself. But then there's a whole nother aspect to having a wife and later having kids. How did you pray? How did God help both, you and Liz make it through those moments? There's guys here who there may be pressure and tension at work, pressure with, jobs that are disappearing or jobs that, may have transition, kids that may be causing stress. There's battlefields that are separate than, the Olympic venue or the SEAL venue that guys are dealing with, but it's all stress at the same time. How did you find the Lord helping you and your wife in the extremes?
I brought a couple extra pictures. Can I show you?
Sure.
You brought up kids. There's a couple kid pictures in there. If you can go to those and show one of the kid pictures. If you can find it. That's my son. When 9/11 hit, so my daughter just turned 18 the day before. We were in the hospital. When she was born the next morning, 9/11 hit. My son won't let go of my leg because I'm home and I'd already missed half of his life. Can you go to the next kid picture? I was home long enough to get an award. I was receiving the Bronze Star in this picture, and my daughter wouldn't let go of my leg. My oldest daughter, when I'd come back off deployments, wouldn't talk to me for days. I look at these and I get a lump in my throat and I struggle. I struggle with this. I left a wife at home with 3 kids to raise on her own while I was gone. And there wasn't a moment, not a moment that I didn't struggle with that every day that I was out there on missions, not knowing if I was going to come back. It took everything in me, faith-wise, to get through that. Those were some of the most difficult times of my life. And I am not too proud to say I spent a lot of time on my knees praying to God above to get me through those times.
Yeah. The difference, and then we're going to transition here, but, for you to walk and to have the Lord and to, take a knee before you go into combat, even in times where you were, you had a mortar that hit right by you, you were knocked off, you took like a level of a concussion, and you were a medic, and you couldn't even, you had no freedom to deal with your own issue. You had to find the courage and the strength to get up and go help the other guys who were injured. A lot of those kind of settings. And in the midst of all of that, God carried you through. Talk about what happens with other guys, and then we're going to close and we'll take some Q&A with the guys. But the difference between you having faith and being here today as a man with a marriage that's intact, with kids who love you, even though you had such sacrifice of being away from them, contrasted with the guys who didn't have faith and where you watch them go because of the stress and the anguish. And, I could fill in the blanks, but why don't you with what happens, what a clear picture there is between having that faith and having God help you and trying to go it alone.
Yeah. I had very similar conversations with God like Brian did. And, I think there's about a 50% divorce rate in the SEAL teams. And it's understandable when you're have an op tempo like that. We were at war for 17, almost 18 years. And it takes its toll on families, guys doing back-to-back-to-back deployments. You're under constant stress, running operations, several a night, on a reverse sleep cycle, trying to get sleep, oftentimes injured. You've got friends dying. You miss your family. That's what got me through. And for those guys that I feel, from my perspective, didn't have faith, they faltered and they fell to other things, whether it was, alcohol or other women or things like that caused their lives to kind of crumble. It's truly God's example for us, Jesus' example for us, and his sacrifice on the cross, and the strength that he showed was my strength. And I don't know how else to say that, but I always looked at that, and I looked at my cross, and I'm like, Jesus gave everything for us. And it gave me strength so I could go and give everything for my country and for my family.
Yeah, amen. All right, thank you.